Among the many antagonistic characters in Runeterra, one has cemented himself to be in a league all his own: Mordekaiser, the Iron Revenant. Released on February 24th, 2010, Mordekaiser has always been something of a wild card in the context of League's lore. While just about every other antagonist in the franchise has some sort of affiliation or faction to fall into, Mordekaiser is his own beast, operating completely independently from anyone or anything else in the story. That was not always the case, though. For many years, Mordekaiser was, like many undead characters, a champion of the Shadow Isles. His story has been retconned many times, so I'm afraid we probably won't be able to cover each iteration in as much detail as I'd normally like to, but they all share the same basic idea. Mordekaiser is a walking suit of armor whose true origins are unknown, but many fear him for his mastery over dark magic. This includes the ability to rip souls from mortals as well as make them fight for him, but also the ability to control metal. While nothing was certain, there were many breadcrumbs to imply that Mordekaiser was likely some kind of general, leading many to speculate that he actually served the then unrevealed Ruined King. This was further supported by lines from the Twisted Treeline's altar ghosts, hinting at a rivalry between Mordekaiser and Hecarim. However, there was another fan theory floating around once upon a time that Mordekaiser was more than just a general, that he was, in fact, a king, the Ruined King. I've touched on this topic before in my Viego essay, but there was a time in which the League fandom knew almost nothing about the Ruined King. His name, face, appearance, and role in the story were all one big question mark. We knew that the Ruined King was responsible for creating the Shadow Isles in a failed attempt to bring back his dead queen, but that was about it. What happened to him after his ritual went so catastrophically wrong? Some fans believed that, as punishment for his foolishness, he was imprisoned somehow. After all, one of Mordekaiser's bios hints that the armor was meant to protect us more than him. Then, in 2019, Mordekaiser got his VGU. We'll talk about the new lore in a moment, but fans more or less agreed that his new design was a massive improvement over the original. The old design had a bit of a cartoonish charm to it, sure, but the new one leans way more into the realm of someone like, say, Sauron. After all, for those unaware, the name Mordekaiser actually translates roughly to Pain Emperor. With a name like that, Riot clearly decided they wanted to play it straight and give him a design that invoked as much dread as the name. Mordekaiser's new design also had another key principle behind it. Namely, it wanted to do away with the identity crisis he was facing. As mentioned before, Mordekaiser's powers were always a weird mix between ferromancy and necromancy, which led his kit to being this weird mishmash of metal manipulation and soul magic. While Mordekaiser's new design kept the big armored suit, it leaned more into the realm of necromancy, with gaps in the armor showing that its wearer was nothing more than a disembodied spirit underneath. In a sense, it's really not even so much armor anymore, as just a metal husk for Mordekaiser's soul to inhabit. And on that note, let's talk about Mordekaiser's new lore. In a nutshell, Mordekaiser, originally known as Son-Uzal, is a guy who came back from death out of spite. He was once a conquering warlord from a civilization now extinct, and his people basically had their own religion about the afterlife. They called it the Hall of Bones, a place where great warriors could revel and celebrate eternally after a lifetime of hard-won battles. Basically, it was Valhalla. There was a problem, though. The Hall of Bones wasn't real. When Sanuzal eventually died, he wound up in this weird gray purgatory where souls just drifted aimlessly until they faded out of existence. No parties, no food or drink, just waiting around for oblivion. Now, this is slightly curious because other characters and entities imply there is more to Runeterra's afterlife in the spirit realm. But there are still plenty of mysteries revolving death and the spirits that herald it, so we're probably just not meant to know all the answers right now. That wasn't good enough for Sanuzal, though. Seeing the afterlife that awaited him made him furious. So he vowed not to fade away like the other souls around him. Instead, through sheer resentment and force of will, he held his spirit together long enough to explore the Death Realm and uncover its secrets. Sanuzal learned to speak the language of the dead, and used it to uncover a being's true name. He learned his own, and used that knowledge to reach across the realms so that he may influence the minds of the living. Sanuzal, now known as Mordekaiser, tricked a bunch of necromancers into resurrecting him through a set of specially crafted armor, killed them, then bound their souls to him. From there, he decided to go right back to doing what he did in life, killing and conquering. Because what else was he gonna do, I guess? So yeah, Mordekaiser builds the Immortal Bastion, takes over a good chunk of Valoran, and decided to uncover the secrets of all of existence. He will learn the truth behind everything. Life, death, infinity, oblivion, and everything in between. If the universe wouldn't give Mordekaiser the glorious afterlife he felt he deserved, the Revenant would simply make his own. Unfortunately for him, one of the witches that had come to serve Mordekaiser would eventually betray him, banishing him back to the Death Realm and sealing his armor deep below the very fortress he built as his stronghold. Unfortunately for everyone else, Mordekaiser had already planned for this. Turns out he'd bound everyone he ever killed as a revenant to his will, so when he went to the Death Realm for a second time, he had a whole army of tortured souls waiting for him to come and lead them. Now, all that's left is for Mordekaiser to find a way back into the living world once more. And when he does, well, there's a reason why LeBlanc has spent the last several centuries coming up with dozens of contingency plans for Mordekaiser's return. None of them seem all too promising in the long run, though. So yeah, Mordekaiser is now his own beast. An undead warlord with enough arcane power and knowledge to rival even the likes of Xerath or Lysandra. And unlike a lot of other antagonistic forces in League, Mordekaiser doesn't really have a protagonist who can oppose him, like the Void or the Shadow Isles. The best we've currently got is LeBlanc, who herself is a villain leading her own cabal that ultimately just fears Mordekaiser's vengeance after she betrayed him all those years ago. Mordekaiser's story is certainly an interesting one, and many fans, myself included, are eager to see where his story takes him from here. He is, effectively, an undead tyrant even more dangerous and ruthless than Viego. Which again begs the question, what if the two were one and the same? What if Sanuzal had been made Lord of the Shadow Isles instead of the ruined king we now know? Even after his rework, there was a brief period of time when Mordekaiser still had connections to the Shadow Isles. One version of his bio had his skull being hidden away there, as it would be necessary to resurrect him again. When the ruination happened, however, the necromantic energies touching that skull would ultimately serve as a possible gateway for Mordekaiser's return. Before it was revealed what the Black Mist actually was, many assumed that it might actually be the fog of the Death Realm leaking out into the living world. It seems very likely there was, at one point in time, a genuine plan to make Mordekaiser the ruined king before deciding to take him in a radically different direction. Unfortunately, this is a Recollections video, not a rewrite or let's talk about, so we'll leave discussions of hypotheticals there for the time being. Ultimately, whatever Mordekaiser could have been, fans are generally overall pretty positive toward his rework. Riot set out to make a ruthless, menacing, undead overlord worthy of the name Pain Emperor, and they succeeded. Mordekaiser is a character with a lot of expectations, because with so much power at his disposal and no protagonist that could really pose much of a serious threat to him yet, at least not as a direct counter, his return to the living world will make the harrowing seem like a Sunday stroll. Which, admittedly, it kind of was thanks to the Sentinels of Light event, but you get the point. But what do you all think? Are you excited to see Mordekaiser's story play out as is, or would you have rather seen a different take on the Iron Revenant? Leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I'll see you all next time.